whether we're talking about AI companies, computer games, or anything and everything in between, the world has simply moved towards a rentier economy. This is nothing new, really. There are plenty of examples of us being screwed over where we no longer truly own anything. Let's just take a couple of examples that are fairly recent. Firstly, let's just look at the AI companies. It's true that things just have been getting very weird. Let's take a look at OpenAI. Firstly, there's this issue with the codecs, and we're just looking at the coding harnesses to start with. There's this issue with the codecs telemetry where there's this issue where it just stops at 516 reasoning tokens, and it's causing to a degradation of performance. Just imagine that one day something works perfectly fine, and then the next day it doesn't, even though you're paying for it. On the Anthropic side, one interesting thing is, like, even if you pay for it, if you're not using the official harness, things can all of a sudden break simply because you're not using official harness, and therefore all of a sudden your tool calling no longer works. The model is no longer adhering to what used to work, or the old coding harness, and now it's expecting this different form. So even if you're using a newer model, well, you still have this weird scenario where things are worse now for you. For the OpenAI one, yeah, there's this unusual scenario that was called out. This to do with the thinking tokens that have been provided. So you didn't change anything, but the harness changed. The harness is now doing something else. Is probably for cost reasons. They're probably restricting the reasoning tokens that's coming out, and they're hoping that for the general user it doesn't really affect anything, or maybe they've done some A/B testing in the background to say that, well, for the majority of cases this actually has negligible impact on the quality of your work. But this kind of silent thing really affects people, right? It really affects you if it does affect your work, and it's also goes counter to what you expect for what you have paid for. It's very jarring to have something that worked 3 months ago, and then all of a sudden now it doesn't work. And what the consequence of this is, it's really just pushing people, or at least it may be pushing people towards selecting higher reasoning levels, like X high, when before you didn't really need it. And maybe it's not even working, even if you are selecting the most expensive one. And I think that's part of the probably the conspiracy theory side, is that's part of the plan, right? You want to push people to the more expensive models rather than have them use the low reasoning when it should work. Now, I think in practice this probably doesn't really amount to anything, and it's probably a mistake, but it's something that you need to be cognizant for. Like, why would if this is accidental and they've done some A/B testing to try to push users in a particular direction, well, one reason for this is because they want you to pay more money. This kind of behavior, which is very common. I shouldn't just blame OpenAI for this, but many SaaS companies, to try to push people to more premium products is a very common strategy. And I think it's the fact of life when you don't own the thing that you are purchasing. You're beholden to what the SaaS company wants to do. And this kind of thing happens also on the Anthropic side. So this is on the Anthropic side on the tool calling. So the issue that we have here is, if you use your own harness, so now you don't want to use Claude code because for whatever reason, you're now getting punished for it, right? So you have the older models, they have a lower error rate, and all of a sudden you move to the latest model, you move to Sonnet 5, and your error rate more than doubles. That really sucks. That should not be the default experience or the default expectation, right? where you pay more money for the latest thing and you get punished for it. Perhaps this is just a consequence of Anthropic wanting to keep their moat for the Claude code, right? So if they do their fine tuning on the newer version of their tool calling, maybe they've come up with some suggestion that this is a more efficient way to do tool calling. This does affect other people who don't use the same tool calling semantics or haven't caught up to the new tool calling semantics, and hence it punishes them. Again, this falls into the same kind of model where you are inadvertently punished because you don't own the thing and you're beholden to the actual people who can do whatever they want. In this case, Anthropic. What's the actual change if you want to see what it looks like? So this is particularly for the Pi harness, which I use a lot of. So on the left-hand side, it normally looks something like this. You have a list of edits. If you want to do multi-edits, you can just keep piling on edits, and it's an array of different edits. In a new form, well, rather than taking a list of like objects, which is old text and new text, all of a sudden it's just like it just assumes that there is a list of changes that's all in one kind of object, right? So for example, it might hallucinate something like old text, new text, and then new text 2, and old text 2, and so on and so forth. There's been different things that people have observed, and yeah, this causes issues because the edit tool in Pi harness and probably many other different harnesses don't expect it in this kind of format. So all of a sudden we have a newer model that should be superior to the older model hallucinating inputs, which points to perhaps there was some human reinforcement learning that bias towards this kind of thing. Perhaps is a sign that their edit tool within the Claude code uses a different kind of schema than before. So this is compared to two kind of regressions that we see. For the GPT one, for the GPT one, we have some issues where things are just clustered around like a particular token count, which didn't happen before. And for the Anthropic one, started just hallucinating new text that wasn't there before. And this is a consequence of whether it's like a new change in their harness in the case of OpenAI, or a new model doing weird things compared to the old model. Either way, these are things which break expectations of a user. If in the Anthropic case, if you're not using their product, but in OpenAI case, even if you are using their product, something has changed and you're not privy to it and you can't control for that. There's nothing you can do. If you were depending on this system for something critical, all of a sudden, like 1 month to the next, something has changed. And that really kind of sucks because you don't own that. All right. Now, the other type of control that we might have is like you might be in a scenario where in the case of video games, you no longer own your video games, right? We have a situation where customers are losing control of their media. Example of this is Sony recently had two kind of announcements. One of them was that they are no longer doing physical media, and the second one is that there was a scenario where certain films that were purchased, Sony is now removing those digital versions away from customers' library. So the key contention here is around ownership. It's the fact that you no longer own something that you have purchased, and it's a form of control, right? Like the reason why that has happened could be attributed to many things. It's probably related to like digital rights management and certain controls that Sony has on something that you've purchased from them that you no longer truly own. It's not about the physical media versus digital media per se. It's the fact that digital media doesn't come with ownership as part of the purchase. Yeah, and it again comes right down to this digital licensing. It's the fact that it's the fact that simply by being online, something can be revoked later on because of a variety of reasons that are, again, outside of your control, that affect your ownership. There are many interesting terms of service that people have noted that had come up, such as if you don't log into your PlayStation account, maybe they'll delete your account and remove the games that you've purchased. So things like that can all of a sudden start occurring. And now this would not occur if in the previous world, where you had the physical disc and the games and the console would work offline. Now, this concept where our digital library or something that you've purchased disappears from your library isn't anything new. Probably the first recorded case is actually from Valve, where they pulled a game called Order of War. After the server shut down, they just removed it from your library. Similarly, like Nintendo has done similar things where the Game Boy era library vanished digitally after the Wii store closed. Right, so this is an example where you've purchased something, but you don't really own it. You've sort of just rented it for the period of where the service has been live. And this is a problem. This is a problem. So if we compare where we were and where we are now, we have a scenario where previously, if you owned the physical asset and you could interact with that asset in an offline state, so for example, if you could put it in your computer, you can install it on the computer without a connection to the internet, you could play the game on the computer without a connection to the internet, that's all well and good. But nowadays, that's not the case. It's like, even if you purchase it, even if you have the physical media, if that game or that service requires some kind of phone home to check whether it's valid and it can just delete itself, that's still a problem. And that will happen in many scenarios that I've shown. It's not even a recent example. We had that Valve example that was from 2013 where that happened as well. So that is the problem. We no longer truly own things. We are in a state where we are constantly renting items in this day and age. And I think that this has been a common trend. It's not just a developer, it's not just a consumer, but there's plenty of examples. We have movies, we have games, we have music, we have even parts of the car, like BMW and heated seats that was on a subscription plan. It's pervasive in the world that we live in. And that is part of the problem. Like, if you don't own this pipeline, then someone else owns it. Now, I think one of the problems of this is this kind of world was, in a way, promised by the World Economic Forum. They had an essay that has been memed onto the ends where we can quote, "I own nothing, I have no privacy, and my life has never been better." That's paraphrased from it. And they took that kind of idea and they tried to sell it as though it was some form of a utopia or some kind of an ideal to achieve for. And it, perhaps rightly so, got memed on from all kinds of and all corners of the internet about how ridiculous that is. But unfortunately, moving forward 10 years since then, that has only began to run more and more true. So that's the thing that we need to consider for tech industry and also as a consumer. Where is all of this going? Do we really own the things that we have? Are we just moving towards a rentier economy, and are we just relying on things that are borrowed?